all editions. Today I'm going to be showing you in Photoshop how to create the effect that we've done here, where we've nested the skull inside the man's head in this poster design in Photoshop. We'll be using assets from our Skulls and Skeletons image archive and also our Portraits of Men image archive. So if you have those, please feel free to follow along, or there's a bunch of sample packs on our website where you'll be able to test out the same technique too. Okay, so I've got my new document open and I have two images that I'm going to be using. So I'm just going to quickly name my layers so we don't get confused. So that's skull. This one we'll just call man. I'm just going to turn the skull layer off for a moment. I'm just going to center this. So the first thing we're going to want to do is, firstly, let's put a layer mask on the image of the man by clicking this icon here, which is the rectangle with the circle in the middle. If anyone hasn't used layer mask, basically it's a way just to be able to sort of paint in and out elements of the image using sort of the black and white fill colors here. So if I get my brush by clicking B, I'll just quickly show you, make this a bit bigger. You can erase part of the image and you can see that sort of denoted here. And then if I'm using white, I'll be able to paint that back in. Cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my marquee tool and I'm going to select the elliptical marquee tool, and you can get to that by pressing M on the keyboard also. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select sort of the area where we want the skull to be nested in the head. So it's going to be sort of like halfway up the sort of the skull here in the middle of the forehead. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a selection that's roughly the same size, and we can adjust this at the moment in a moment. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a new layer so that we don't fill it in on that layer. We want to be able to move it around. I'm going to select this color here, which is my background color of the image. I am going to press X on the keyboard to make sure that this is my background color here. And then I'm going to press Command Delete or on Mac and Control Delete if you are using Windows. Okay, so do you know what? I'm actually just going to put a color overlay on this just for the moment, just so I can see more clearly. Actually, I want like a brighter color. We'll get rid of this in a minute, just so I can sort of see where I'm at. Okay, cool. So I want to make sure that this sits sort of nice and tight in there. I want it to line up with the image. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so what I want to do now is go back down to my layer mask on the image of the man. I want to make sure that I've selected the layer mask, close that. So I don't want to be on the image, I want to be on the layer mask. I want to make sure that my foreground color is black so that I'll be erasing away the image, not painting it in. So I'm going to press B to get the brush up, and I am just going to paint this away. Cool. Looks good. So you can sort of see how this is going to come together already. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another new layer, and I am going to hold down Command on my keyboard, and that will be Control if you're using Windows. And I'm going to hover over this layer here where we used we've got this sort of elliptical marquee in yellow. So I'm going to come to that layer. I'm going to hold down Command. You're going to notice that there's sort of like a square next to the hand icon. I'm going to click OK, and that's going to make a live selection. So I'm going to go to my new layer. I'm going to get a brush. I'm going to go back to my brush tool. I am going to go for the soft round brush. Going to increase the size of this. What I'm going to do is, actually that's too big, I'm just going to bring that down even further, and I'm going to select the blending mode to dissolve, and I'm just going to brush that in like so. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to deselect this, doing by pressing Command D on the keyboard. Now I'm also going to turn off this color overlay, and now you can sort of see how we've got this. It looks like basically the inside of the head has sort of been hollowed out, and that's how we're going to be able to sort of create the illusion of the skull being nested with inside the head. So let's get on to doing the skull now. Okay, so now we're going to nest the skull with inside his head. So I'm going to turn on the skull layer. Firstly, I'm going to apply a layer mask to this too. So I'm going to do that by coming down to this icon here, which is the rectangle with the circle in the middle. Now we can see we have our layer mask there. I'm just going to move this up. I'm just going to quickly check our reference and see where it was cropped. Okay, cool. So it's sort of just where the start of the top teeth begin there. So I'm just going to lower the opacity so I can sort of see. Zoom in a bit. That looks about right. Okay. Put the opacity back up. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to hold Command. I'm going to hover over the ellipse that we made before to select it. And now I'm going to press Command Shift I to inverse the selection, or you could go to Select and you could just go inverse here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my brush. I'm going to make sure that it's not set to the dissolve setting that we had before. So I'm going to go back to the hard round brush. I'm going to just go back to normal. I'm going to make sure that I have black as my foreground color. I'm going to make sure that I have my layer mask selected, not the image. And I am just going to paint this away. Okay, cool. And now I'm just going to press Command D to deselect. And we can see that that is starting to look like it is nested within. One thing that I am going to do is you can't see that sort of reflection that we put on the back to sort of make it look like there was a reflection on that elliptical on that ellipse, so that it sort of gave it more of a 3D effect. So what I want to do is put more of that in, so that we have the effect that the head is actually hollowed out and the skull is nested within. It kind of looks convincing at the moment, but it could be better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to this part of the to this layer that we put on top of the ellipse. I'm going to apply a layer mask to that as well, again by clicking on this icon. I'm going to get back the soft brush. I'm going to have it set to dissolve. I'm going to again make sure that my foreground color is black so that we can paint away part of the image. And I'm just going to, behind the skull there, just put in just a few little highlights so it gives it more of a three-dimensional look. So I think that's looking good. So what we need to do again now is repeat the process that we did for the man's head. We need to do that for the skull. So again, I am going to this time just duplicate this ellipse. I'm going to bring it up to the top there. And the reason I'm just duplicating it and not doing it again is so that the perspective remains the same. So I'm going to, let me just check my reference, sort of just above the brow here. That looks about right. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Okay. Back there. Okay, that needs to go out a bit. How's that looking? Could go a little bit further. Pretty good. So again, I am going to go down to the skull. I'm going to click onto the layer mask. I'm going to get my brush tool. Again, I don't want the soft brush set to dissolve. I just want the normal. and I am going to paint away the top of the skull here. Just going to edge that out there. Cool. Okay, so I am again going to create a new layer. I'm going to go back to the ellipse, which sits on top of the skull. I'm going to hold down Command. I'm going to make that selection. I'm going to my new layer. I am going to make sure that I've got the foreground color that I want there, which I do. I need the soft brush set to dissolve again. And I am just going to try and paint in that effect that we did just before. Actually, one thing, I'm just going to not go in so far this time. Okay, now Command D to deselect, Control D if you're using a PC. And what we are going to do now is we're going to duplicate this image of the man. We're going to drag it to the top. We are going to go up. Let me zoom out here for a second. Okay, I'm going to bring this down in size. Now, what I want to do is, again, select the ellipse that was sitting on top of the skull. So it's this layer here. I want to press Command so that I make that selection. Then I want to go to inverse again. So I want to inverse the selection. So go select, go inverse. Now that has made all the outside area live. I want to make sure that I am on the layer mask of the duplicate of the man that we just made. I want to press B on my keyboard for brush. I want to bring up the hard round brush. I want to make sure that the blending mode is set to normal. And then underneath here, I'm just going to just paint that away. And then that is not entirely as it was in the poster, but it's pretty close. And I think it sort of shows you how you can get that the same technique and effect, and you can apply that to all sorts of graphics. So yeah, I hope you found this tutorial useful. And yeah, if you do use it, please be sure to tag us in Instagram, or you can send us an email at info@voldeditions.com. We'd love to check out your artwork, and we will be back next week with a new tutorial. So I'll speak to you then.